Disclaimer under copyright disclaimer section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing non-profit use, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Making sure that you all see that.
Welcome to another Intel drop, talking about what matters to us. All right, let's do this. So I tell y'all to research. And if you don't have the information or never heard of the information, inquire, search, and then research, right? But be cautious on speaking on a matter before you know about it. And so I was reading through Forbes articles today. Sometimes I'll read publications or science reports, different journals and articles in the Library of Congress or the National Institute of Medical Health and different places where people have put their research and data. But often I will watch videos or documentaries or read through things like Forbes. And so I found it interesting that today I saw this Looney Tunes picture, and that's what drew my attention. So I don't know what draws you. You're listening to me right now, so maybe there's something that draws you to what I have to say on Intel Drop. Whatever it is, just make sure that you're fact checking, right? Do your own search and then research. Get knowledge before you speak on a matter. Like I say, research, because these folks are researching you. Where do you think they come up with the data? Yeah, there's some controlled studies and experiments and things like that. And according to fully informed consent, like I continue to talk about, you have to know that you're being experimented or searched or part of a study and sign some consents and be fully informed about that. But when we're talking about specific fields of like psychology or sociology, psychology being the practice of, examining the individual's behaviors, thoughts, and brain, neuroscience being involved in that to some capacity, and just their practices in society or around their environment, right? Sociology being collective or group looks. And so here we have Mark Travers, a contributor, and he says he writes about the world of psychology, all right? Nelson Mandela, renowned freedom fighter and anti-apartheid activist, spent 27 years in prison, a tale of resilience and hardship. Yet his compelling story is often distorted in collective memory. Talking about all y'all. Talking about whoever is the collective. Okay. As many vividly recall, Mandela's death in prison during the 1980s. In reality, Mandela lived a long and fruitful life post-incarceration. He went on to become president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999 and passed away in 2013 at 95 years old. Despite these facts, many hold strongly to the belief that they remember Mandela had died in prison. This mind-boggling phenomenon, a massive collective belief in an event or fact that is not true, has been dubbed the Mandela effect. Interestingly, this phenomenon has been observed extensively in different contexts. But how is it that our minds can convince us of having memories of events that never really happened? And how is it that large groups of people can all happen to share the exact same false memory. Here's what psychologists know about the Mandela effect: how our brains create false memories. The Mandela effect is often agreed to be an example of a false memory, a recollection that seems true in your mind, but in reality is either partially or entirely fabricated. While it sounds implausible that the mind is capable of lying to us in such ways, false memories occur frequently. For instance, think of those times where you swear you turned the stove off, where you're sure you pressed send on that important email. You're positive you put that carton of milk in your shopping cart, only to find that you never actually did. A study published in Consciousness and Cognition explains how these false memories can happen through the self-memory system, a conceptual framework highlighting the connection between our sense of self and our memory. This interconnection encompasses our episodic memory, autobiographical memory, and our portion of self-concept that guides information processing, or the working self. The researchers explain that our working self takes cues to build detailed memories based on the knowledge they bring up. This helps constructing memories of our past and even in imagining future events. This construction process happens in what is called the remembering imagining system, a mental space filled with recent memories and simulations of things that might happen soon. However, it is also explained that this system, for various reasons, malfunctions from time to time. Our modern understanding of human memory challenges the idea that memories are always accurate. In fact, it's argued that all memories to some degree are false. Can research explain the Mandela effect? The Mandela effect comes into play when these constructions of recollections that feel authentic yet deviate from actual events happen at the collective level, where large groups of people recall the same baseless fact or event. Mandela's false death in the 80s is only a single example of this, and many more have been identified since the term has been coined. For example, almost everyone has played the classic family board game, Monopoly. Upon being asked to describe Mr. Monopoly, the man on the cover of the box, many would describe an older gentleman with a cane, a top hat, and a monocle. However, not a single iteration of Monopoly has included him wearing a monocle, yet countless people swear by this memory. Similarly, many will confidently recall the classic cartoon film series Looney Tunes, the series Sex and the City, and Darth Vader's classic line, "Luke, I am your father." In reality, the show is spelled Looney Tunes. The series is called Sex and the City. And the line goes, "No, I am your father." Psychological science research aimed to explain this baffling phenomenon, revealing that specific images from popular culture consistently lead to particular false memories. Using eye tracking like methods, the researchers found no attention or visual related differences causing these collective false memories. Their conclusion was that these errors spontaneously occur during memory recall, emphasizing that despite the majority experiencing the correct image visually, people consistently make the same false memory error for certain images. Does the Mandela effect go beyond memory and psychology? In various fields that work with the mind, it is well known that memory is fallible. It fades over time. It makes mistakes, and it cannot always be trusted. This agreed understanding allows us to make sense of false memories. However, the phenomenon of collective false memories seems to extend beyond the knowledge of psychology and neuroscience. In alignment with most research on the Mandela effect, the above study from psychological science concludes that we cannot know for certain why large groups of people share these fabricated memories. This gap in knowledge has led people down various paths in an attempt to understand it. Some studies argue it is the cause of some kind of glitch in the matrix, delving into connections between the Mandela effect, simulation theory, and parallel worlds. Others still maintain it's a classic example of a false memory, just as a very large and inexplicable level. But as it stands, the Mandela effect seems to be one of the quirks of the mind science just can't yet explain. Conclusion. The Mandela effect remains a perplexing enigma, challenging the limits of our understanding. It defies conventional explanations, leaving a profound mystery in its wake, and research on the matter merely scratches the surface of its inexplicable nature. Attempts to grasp its essence seem only to have led to conspiracy-like theories, hinting at uncharted territories lying beyond the scope of current scientific comprehension, standing testament to the mind's capacity for peculiarities that continue to elude our grasp.
I got my own 2 cents, if you know what I mean. I got my own 2 cents, if you know what
They said make it make sense. Some folks out here trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. None of it's adding up. The other article was written from the psychological standpoint. As you can see, this one is from the scientific standpoint. Both of them fills the science and practice differently, right? And so as you can see right here, Space and Science, CNN World. The Mandela effect describes the false memories many of us share, but why can't scientists explain it? By Jacopo Prisco. All right. And so CNN. Does Mr. Monopoly wear a monocle? Is there a black stripe on Pikachu's tail? Does the fruit in the Fruit of the Loom logo pour out of a cornucopia? Okay. If you answered yes to any of these questions, sorry, you're wrong. But you might also be experiencing the so-called Mandela effect. Paranormal researcher Fiona Broom coined the name after becoming convinced that then South African President Nelson Mandela had died in prison in 1980s. But Mandela did not die in prison. He was released in 1990, went on to lead South Africa, and died in 2013. However, Broom noticed that many others seem to share the same inaccurate memory, prompting further investigation. Since then, more communal false memories have surfaced, such as C-3PO of Star Wars, fame being entirely gold. He has a silver leg. Jiffy as the name of a well-known peanut butter brand. It's just Jif. The spelling of a classic children's book being the Bernstein Bears. It's really the Bernstein Bears. And a host of mosquitoes from movies, among them Luke, I Am Your Father, from The Empire Strikes Back. The actual line is, no, I am your father. We saw this in the other article. If you build it, they will come, from Field of Dreams. It's, if you build it, he will come. And perhaps the most misremembered of them all, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Wicked Queen actually says magic mirror on the wall. But why do so many people misremember these? False memories. The Mandela effect is a really fascinating memory phenomenon where everyone seems to show inaccurate memories for common popular icons, says neuroscientist Wilma Bainbridge, an assistant professor in the University of Chicago's Department of Psychology. It is really growing in popularity on the internet on sites like Reddit and TikTok. And while for many people it's sort of a fun little game that they might play, I realize that it is actually a very interesting effect of human memory that hadn't been studied experimentally before.
I got my own 2 cents, if you know what I mean. I got my own 2 cents, if you know what
They said make it make sense. Some folks out here trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. None of it's adding up.
Remember, I done told y'all, they're going to research you anyway. Might as well, you look, if you are being researched from the doctor, I talk about this again, informed consent, informed consent, informed consent, fully informed consent. However, I liken society to a labyrinth of experiments, controlled ones at that. So sometimes you'll hear me talk about control by deprivation, where people are denied their wants, needs, and desires, while groups around them are given their wants, needs, and desires in excess. And the people that are denied their wants, needs, and desires, it affects them because they've been deprived. And they're watching other people have access to their wants, needs, and desires. And so there is a psychological, true, felt, experiential impact from control by deprivation. Check out the term that I am telling you. Control by deprivation. Or it's called deprivation control. Okay, the CIA used to use it as a tactic to interrogate people and get the information that they wanted out of them. I've talked about this before. Go look it up. Or you can go back to one of my videos and go look it up. Do both. Do all of them, right? Study to show yourself approved. Anyway, back to the article. With co-author Prasad, Bainbridge conducted a rare study published by the journal Psychological Science in late 2022 on the Mandela effect, in which they first confirmed that people have confident but incorrect visual memories of famous icons or characters. Prasad was a lab manager and research assistant at Chicago at the time of the research and is currently a doctoral student of psychological and brain sciences at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. Woo, they fancy, aren't they? Fancy. All right, so here you see a picture of the birds, the bees, and the Bernstein Bears. First time books, okay? And so the researchers tried to find simple causes for the phenomenon, such as people not looking directly at the detail in question when observing the character or images across the internet displaying the errors. But they found no match for these hypotheses. Bainbridge and Prasad also had the participants in the experiment draw the icons from memory to see whether they would spontaneously create these errors, and they found that they often did. A big takeaway is that while the Mandela effect shows up across different types of experiments, there's no one clear explanation for it, Bainbridge said. So future research is needed to see what's causing this. It's important to remember how prone we can be to inaccuracy, noted Neil Dagnall, a cognitive and parapsychological researcher at Manchester Metropolitan University in the United Kingdom. Very often, when we're processing information, we see things as we think they are, rather than they actually are. Attention is a very interesting phenomenon, said Dagnall, who is a reader in applied cognitive psychology. Mandela effect. People are often remembering things the way they think they should be, rather than they actually are, because we just process things very quickly in everyday life. Now we're getting a little bit closer to the truth, right? I mean, people are often remembering the things the way they think they should be, rather than the way they actually are. It sounds more closer to the truth than before, okay? Dagnall brought up the example of these Dees, Roediger, and McDermott task, a false memory test in which people receive lists of words to recall. For example, if we gave people sewing-related items like pin, cotton, thread, when they are asked to recall them, they also recall words that weren't in the list, but are associated with sewing, like needle. In the same way, people could be adding thematically similar details to their recollection of an image, he said. Ken Drinkwater, a fellow researcher at Manchester Metropolitan, added that the effect might be connected to a condition called false memory syndrome. In their individual identity and in the way they see the world, people are influenced by factually incorrect recollection. They could strongly believe in something or strongly believe that they've had this experience or this memory, but in actual fact, it's fantasy, said Drinkwater, a senior lecturer at the university. Several years ago, we got to look at whether people could tell between genuine and imagined memories. Dagnall said, if you ask people questions about an air disaster, for example, when they recall the events, they wouldn't just recall what they saw on the news. They would also recall additional information because they aren't able to discriminate between what they'd seen, their actual memory, and what they'd imagined. If you think about a plane crash, you can imagine many associate things because you've seen them in films, on TV, or in the news. All right, here's a picture of many people think Mr. Monopoly on the right wears a monocle. However, they may be confusing his appearance with that of Mr. Peanut, who shares a similar sartorial style. And do you guys think that the industry, advertising, marketing, business world, corporate America, doesn't realize the similarities in style, right, when they're producing these images? Anyway, it would be an interesting search or research topic, inquiry, for you to find out when Planters Peanuts came out with this image and when Monopoly, came out with theirs. And are they owned in common by a certain parent company? That would be interesting for you to do on your time of searching. Some common examples of the Mandela effect have perhaps logical explanations, such as Mr. Monopoly wearing a monocle, because it complements his old-fashioned sartorial style, similar to Mr. Peanut, who has one, or Pikachu having a black tip on his tail because his ears also have black tips. But these generalizations may not apply to other errors. Parallel worlds. It's about to get interesting, y'all. Pull up a seat. I hope you got your popcorn, because I'm going to add in my thoughts here shortly. Not like I wasn't giving them all along throughout, but I wanted to kind of get through these articles and then tell you what one peculiar collective memory that demonstrates how powerful false recall can be is of a supposed 1990s movie about a genie called Shazam, starring actor David Atkins, better known as Sinbad. There is no such movie, to the bafflement of countless people on the internet who could have sworn to the contrary. No, Sinbad never starred in a 1990s movie called Shazam. He is shown at the 2018 Fox Television Network upfront in New York City. What does exist, however, is the 1996 movie Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal as the title character. Advocates of the Mandela effect thinks it's a genuine effect. Many believe this is based on the many worlds or multiverse theory, and that things are different in parallel realities, Dagnall said, referring to the theory that suggests there may be other universes, potentially an infinite number of them beyond our own. I also came across the idea of time travel, which would be causing small changes in the fabric of time. But y'all can't even, the rocket can't even make it past the firmament. This is my thoughts. I'm just speaking on my opinion. We just saw this rocket that was launched from SpaceX explode when it got to the furthest point it could go, right? Whatever. Another popular theory is that the Large Hadron Collider, a particle accelerator at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, known as CERN, in Switzerland, has opened a portal to a different dimension when it was activated in 2008. Clara Nellis, a CERN particle physicist, responded to such concerns on TikTok, specifically about Oreo double-stuffed cookies bearing that name rather than double-stuffed, saying that there are much higher energy particle collisions happening in our atmosphere all the time. I can promise you we are not going around changing the labels on your food. Interesting. Okay, so there's Clara Nellis' statement, and she is a CERN particle physicist, took to TikTok to dispel conspiracy theories circulating on social media that the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva was used to manipulate the brand name of Oreo double-stuffed chocolate chip cookies. Okay. The lack of evidence to support these theories hasn't stopped people from getting creative with them. One TikTok account, for example, shows popular Mandela effect examples through the screen of an early camera phone, which displays the alternate version because it is supposedly a technological relic from a parallel universe. During times of uncertainty, like the pandemic, disinformation, misinformation, and conspiracy theories become more prevalent. Now we're getting closer to the truth. I mean, disinformation, misinformation, and it wasn't just during the pandemic. I continue to get triggered by everything being blamed on the pandemic, right? Like, people are going to continue to do that as if that is the starting point for everything. People were constantly disinforming or misinforming the public before the pandemic. Let's just get that clear. And I'm going to be touching on that, right? So I'm glad it's stated here as an example, because I'm going to talk about this. Drinkwater said, people want to look at something that gives them more meaning. So it could be that belief in the Mandela effect might be heightened because of this process. The University of Chicago's Bainbridge, however, said she has bad news for alternate reality hopefuls. Sorry to disappoint people who believe in the parallel universe, but in our drawing study, we asked people if they had heard of Pikachu or Mr. Monopoly before, and they said no. We would show them a picture, then after a short delay, we asked them to draw them from memory, she said. Even those who had never heard of them still made some of those errors, like the tail and the monocle. These people had this false memory right after learning about the characters, which shows that this effect can happen even without going across parallel dimensions.
I got my own 2 cents if you I got my own 2 cents if you know what I mean. I got my own 2 cents if you know what
They said make it make sense. Some folks out here trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. None of it's adding up.
Now, let's unveil the bias, the hypocrisy of psychological judgment, especially when it comes to the treatment of Black folks. American society analyzes its behavior, particularly by use of the field of psychology, which holds significant importance to Americans. It's often depended upon to help describe why people engage in inappropriate behavior. However, a troubling trend emerges when we consider the differential treatment of Black people in these matters. Let's shed light on the glaring disparity in the way Americans tend to view psychology and psychological effects when addressing inappropriate conduct, while simultaneously subjecting Black Americans to heavy criticism and unjust treatment. Number 1, the conundrum of criticism. Psychology tells us that individuals' actions are often influenced by complex factors such as upbringing, socioeconomic conditions, and mental health. However, when America assumes inappropriate behavior is being exhibited by Black Americans, their actions are often attributed solely to the terms and conditions established by America based upon melanin. This unjust criticism has fostered and perpetuated narratives that overshadow any rational consideration of individual circumstances and shut down any accountability or responsibility with regards to the corrupt foundation of this nation, which established and deeply entrenched vile terms and conditions by which Black folks have had to live under. Recognize the inherent racism and oppression embedded within these warped judgments and wrong rulings. Number 2, the Mandela effect. Excusing collective behavior manipulation. The Mandela effect refers to a phenomenon wherein collective misremembering of past events is observed. Ironically, actions stemming from this collective misinformation, disinformation, deception, and even lying are often excused and deemed the result of shared fallible memory. This leniency toward the collective perception of reality is starkly contrasted with the harsh scrutiny faced by Black folks. Shouldn't the same extension of understanding and compassion be given to individuals who have been subjected to societal pressures, systemic racism, and historical injustices? But that requires the truth and introspection. So instead, Americans opt to stay collectively irrational. And of course, there's the legal system and governance structure. I wouldn't be myself if I didn't hone in on this one. What about the convenience of fallible memories in the courtroom? The legal system places immense importance on eyewitness testimony, despite the well-documented evidence highlighting the fallibility of memory. Ironically, the same fallible memory that is used in courts to determine guilt or innocence is discredited when it comes to the experiences and truth of Black people. This double standard perpetuates a vicious cycle within the criminal justice system and contributes to widespread injustices. While the scientists and psychologists speak up about everything else, will the scientists and psychologists speak up about the amount of Black people who have been convicted and sentenced to death and life destruction based on this Mandela effect? The suffering of Black individuals through intentional malpractice of using unreliable witness statements and fallible memory has perpetually and disproportionately affected Black people here in the United States of America. Countless individuals have suffered the dire consequences of being wrongfully accused, convicted, and incarcerated due to biased investigations and racially motivated judgments. The weight of this injustice further exacerbates the social and economic disparities that already plague the white ethno-state communities where we live, and a neighborhood watch with block captains should be our immediate response so that the pathology doesn't continue to permeate and metastasize. Will the scientists and psychologists please stand up and speak out about this? Also, here we go with the role of governmental system in the Constitution. The American governmental system or system of governance relies on the principle of checks and balances with three branches of government, the executive, legislative, and judicial, working together to maintain its so-called balanced society. Additionally, the Constitution serves as the foundation of its so-called democracy, protecting the rights and liberties of, quote, all citizens and individuals. However, American system falls short in addressing the racism prevalent in its created white ethno-state society. America's malicious and malevolent discrimination towards us, highlighted in the context of psychology and criminal justice, reveals deep flaws in the effectiveness of these branches and the Constitution in eradicating what it created. The governance structure is good for explaining away its behavior utilizing psychology. However, it is not good at the introspective work needed, and that could be done through the same psychological practice to take a hard look at itself and what is it created and correct its own behavior. I mean, all of the social, political, and financial capital that this capitalistic society has, and it can't solve its own problems, but wants to solve the world's issues. How strong are you really, America? The way Americans tend to view psychology and psychological effects when addressing inappropriate behavior has undergone critical examination with no evidence of progress. It is evident that Black folks are frequently subjected to harsh criticism, unfair treatment, and systemic discrimination, despite living under circumstances where the terms and conditions were predetermined, excluding us from the meeting. I didn't get an invite to the meeting. So, call it the Mandela effect, parallel realities, and even blame it on CERN. But the truth is that America will not escape judgment for its evils and original sin, and we're not entering into a covenant of delusion with you.